Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. It's been to the Jim Jackson Show. It's been an interesting week, and of course, you can follow us on Instagram at Jim Jackson Show, but also on YouTube at youtube.com/Rich Eisen Show, or wherever you download your favorite podcast. And it's been an interesting last 2 days heading into Super Bowl weekend. Trades that have shook the NBA, or a trade that has shaken the NBA. That, of course, is Luka Doncic, 25-year-old phenom, heading to Los Angeles in exchange for Max Christie and Anthony Davis heading over to the Dallas Mavericks. Wow. I mean, talking about blindsided, yeah, and I'm going to dig into that with a good friend who's been tied into the business, Vince Goodwill, in today's show. But that one rocked the NBA, but also the sports world. I think what happened with this deal is it showed that ownership, because of salary restrictions in the NBA, are starting to evaluate what a supermax deal looks like, how it has a stranglehold somewhat on the building of their franchises. And it may be the trickle-down effect here from the CBA, but a transition in how teams are going to be built in the future and how ownership views and values the supermax, or the supermax player, quote unquote. And not to get lost in the shuffle, and we'll dig into this a little bit later too, is I think a quiet trade, a sleeper trade that's going to create shock waves in the Western Conference, and that's De'Aaron Fox to the San Antonio Spurs, and then, of course, Zach LaVine, and other big name, gets to Sacramento. Wemby, De'Aaron, the young core of San Antonio, depending on what Pop wants to do coming back. Very interesting. Very interesting times right now for a franchise that has a lot of pride, championships under their belt, been down a little bit, but has like Luka, a once-in-a-lifetime generational player. Now they're starting to build the blocks around him. And then the last one is Khris Middleton heading over to Washington, but Kyle Kuzma coming over, and does he push the needle to kind of get Milwaukee over the edge to compete with Cleveland and Boston? But a very interesting week. We're going to have a great show talking about it, dive into not just the surface basketball part of what's already known and what's obvious, but more importantly, we're going to dig into, which I think people kind of lose sight on, is the business of basketball and why deals like Luka and AD get done. I had to apologize to my man Vince Goodwill because I canceled a couple of times on some shows, and we get busy doing things, but I'm glad you can join. Just running off a little thing, host of the Good Word podcast, NBA writer, Sirius XM host. You covered, the Detroit Pistons, the Chicago Bulls. Unfortunately, you're on Sundays, I think it is, with Rick Mahorn. I don't know how you get through that, even though that's my old head. And welcome to the show. But the real critical point is, you from the D or you from Southfield? Which one is?
I'm from the D. I'm from the D. Okay. No. I'm from the real.
Where are you
Detroit.
from? What side? West side, east side?
I'm from the east side.
What high school? Because back in the Midwest, it's all about high school.
I went to Cass, so we good.
You went to Cass, okay?
Yeah. We went to Cass. I like you despite you being an Ohio State Buckeye, because the fact that we beat y'all in the Midwest Regional Final, I think it was at Rupp.
Yeah,
right. In overtime, right?
Yeah, in overtime. You know what's funny?
You were like the stockiest college student I'd ever seen in my life.
That's how we do in Ohio. Listen, I grew up basically playing in Detroit, so I used to play over River Rouge. I played at Sandy Sanders. I played at St. Anne's Church on Sundays.
Oh, wow.
Okay. But funny thing is, I couldn't play in the Saint.
Why not?
Because in Ohio, it was a rule, because it wasn't a sanctioned league, that if you played in it, you would be ruled ineligible. So I couldn't play. So I would just have to play at St. Anne's in the summers and stuff like that. Before the season start, a small gym with Magic's picture on there, Chicago and Woodward, I think it is.
Yeah.
and did that. And then I got family and people that live over Woodward, the 7 Mile, Palmer Park area, Sherwood.
Yeah, right by the golf course and everything. Yeah, I know
Come on,
exactly where
man.
you at, man.
It's been a crazy week, huh? Past couple days, huh? I mean, I don't know what happened. I don't know if you heard that uh that it was a big trade. It was Kyle Kuzma and Khris Middleton. That's the one.
That's the one.
Right?
That was the big trade. Getting under that second apron of the luxury tax. That's a big one, Jim.
Hey, no, but serious business. Okay, it's all about the Luka AD trade, and not everybody has talked about it from different. And I want to kind of talk about it a little bit differently from the business side of it, and then we can basketball. But your initial thoughts when you first heard it?
I thought it was, I mean, like everybody else, I thought it was a joke, right? Kind of set the scene. I'm taking like 2 of my best friends were out, or 3 of my best friends were out for like someone's birthday. And then we just come back and we're like, whoa, watch the second half of Lakers Knicks. So then the tweet comes and I'm like, this has got to be a joke. You're a couple bourbons in, you want a stick. You're like, this is not happening. Then you text a couple of people. You're like, oh, this is real. Like, this is all the way real. So initially the thought, Jim, was once it set in, right? The thought was, who did someone ask out? Did Luka quietly ask out? And this was Dallas's way of extracting as much as they could without it going public. Because you knew AD wasn't asking out of LA. Like that really wasn't going to happen. Then once you start talking to people and you see it settled a little bit, my thought, Jim, was, oh, it's about this bread. Because he's up for this extension in a couple of years. And you know this, Jim, from being part of a union. Just because it's money out there, just because they say it's money out there and TV deals coming in and salary cap is rising and everything else, doesn't mean that people want to pay you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like we look at it and say
that part.
Luka's a max player, which he is, top 3 player in the game and everything else. He's up for this super max deal, 5 years, $350+ million, $70 million a year. And at a point, Dallas Mavericks ownership, I believe it was ownership, not Nico Harrison. Exactly. You don't let a GM or a coach make a $500 million decision or $1 billion decision that's probably his worth to the franchise just because you don't like his conditioning or just because you don't like how he
exactly
or whatever. This was a business decision. They did not want to pay him for whatever reason, and Nico Harrison had to go out there and get as much as he could without sounding the alarm. Because if he sounded the alarm, Jim, you know what happens? Oh, Dallas is trading Luka Doncic. Everybody put your hands in. And then Luka says, I'm only going to team X.
Exactly. That part.
So once you tell me you're only going to team X, even if it was the Lakers, that prevents the Lakers from actually having to put Anthony Davis on the table. Can you imagine the Lakers giving the Dallas Mavericks the poo-poo platter of not LeBron, not AD, maybe Austin Reeves, Dalton Connect, maybe one of the statues outside of Staples or something like that, and then you get Luka Doncic. But because of the way that it was done and executed quietly, you may not have liked the deal, but I felt like, not you, Jim, but just you as in people, but the way it was done, it seemed like it was done professionally, I guess, as best as you could say it. You know what I mean? Like I don't think people like that Luka was blindsided by considering all that he meant to the organization. But from the standpoint of, oh, this is a business transaction, I kind of get it.
But it's layered. Okay, let's just break it down from where you're at. Okay, from the basketball perspective, and you said this, Vince, that they had to keep it quiet. And Nico understood too that he had to get the best. So if you're trading a young Luka, you better get something that people can say, I get it. It's not a match for match because of age with AD, but it still keeps you in contention at least for the next 2 years. By a fire sale, getting rid of them, now, yes, you get some draft picks, you get some, but you probably won't get something to that caliber, okay? The other part of it, too, is this. The facade part, to me, of the culture, defense, the out of shape, those are talking points, narratives, that could have been addressed if they really wanted to sign Luka to 350. They could have put covenant and clauses in his deal that he had to adhere to in order to get all of his money. If that's what they really wanted to do, they could have protected themselves like New Orleans did with Zion with his weight clause. They could have done all of that in that new deal, because I guarantee you Luka probably would have signed it anyway. When I first heard it and I thought about it, I said to myself, is something else in play? Because I've been hearing some things before about maybe that Luka, Nico, and J. Kidd were all on different pages.
Mm-hmm.
A certain way that J. Kidd may want to play, that they play more up-tempo. And this is not taking anything away from Luka, but Luka had to play his way.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was this disconnect maybe within the house as to why this is happening. And you know this, Vince, a trade like this doesn't go down in 2 or 3 days. Mm-hmm. This has been talked about, vetted, what if, running scenarios, what's the initial reaction, what's the long-term and short-term effect. That's what we saw. So that part of it, to me, when I heard it, I'm like, it's a bigger business deal to this. That's where I want to get to the ownership.
Yeah.
Okay, for the Mavericks, which is the Adelson family.
Mm-hmm.
Miriam Adelson, I believe, is worth $32 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Has casinos no longer in Vegas, but in, I think, China and maybe Japan, but overseas. The initial part of them, I think, coming to Dallas was
they wanted
the
to get
ownership
in Texas,
and
right?
they wanted the casino.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it, from what I read and heard, was that American Airlines arena was antiquated and that they needed a new arena. So you combine the new arena with the casino, with the largest untapped market there is where there's not legal sports gambling.
Mm-hmm.
That's Texas.
Mm-hmm.
You see where I'm going. Now, Khris Travolti, let me see, what's his Khris? He wrote a great article. I'm gonna pull it up for you. You got to check this out, okay?
Okay.
So it's Christopher Crotterville. He's an attorney out of Dallas. Okay.
Okay.
I mean, really known. He's a litigator, appellate lawyer, managing partner of a law firm. And he talked about the relationship with the Adelson family and Texas legislation regarding the casino and that legislation. So I'm gonna get into that, but what do you think from the ownership perspective? Again, this decision cannot be made singularly in a vacuum by Nico.
No,
it can't be.
No. Look, Rob Pelinka yesterday. Today is Wednesday. Yesterday, which was Tuesday, they had the introductory press conference with Rob Pelinka and Luka. And Rob said something really interesting. I don't say really interesting, but he kind of just sort of let it slip. He said this was a trade from GM to GM and owner to owner.
Right.
And we naturally think it's coach, it's front office. We think it's very like petty and linear. But when these franchises are worth an upwards of $6-7 billion, I think Golden State is now worth $9 billion.
Yes.
On the strength of Steph Curry's right hand.
Yep.
Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's entire empires are built off of these things. So when you are making long-term business decisions and you are saying we are okay with not paying Luka Doncic, a Slovenian superstar, an international superstar in one of the biggest states, like, there is something more to this. Like, it makes too much sense to keep him on paper because he's so valuable to you, for you to say, nah, because of basketball reasons, conditioning and everything else. Look, Jim, there are going to be basketball reasons, right?
Always.
That you can look at it in the finals and you're like, man, did he have 4 fouls in game 3 of the finals and then tried to take the charge in the third quarter when J. Kidd kept him in the game? And, you know, it's stuff like that that makes you think, right? Yeah, you get the basketball reasons, but it's so much more. And, Jim, I'm going to tell you this. You brought up the Zion Williamson contract. I wonder if this is like one of those things that, from a bigger picture, are ownership groups going to say, not collude necessarily, but are they going to say the days of us just giving, even to a top three player, we're just going to hand you $350 million because you've hit all the escalators for all NBA, rookie of the year, everything else. We're just going to give it to you. I don't know if that, we're going to be more Zion Williamson, more Joel Embiid first level of his contract. The first max that Joel Embiid signed
Right.
that had the weight clauses in there, the escalators in it, and everything else. I feel like we're going to have more contingencies. And maybe Dallas just did not want to sign it. That's that cost Luka Doncic over
$100 million.
$100 million.
$100 million. Hey,
You
Vince,
know
but
what, you know what rich people like more than money, Jim?
more money.
More money.
More money. But and here's it, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because here's the thing you got to realize too, from a purely from a business perspective. And again, the Adelson family is about business.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they make more money with the casinos in that business than the Mavericks will ever make. Mm-hmm. Even when the value rises as a team and as a franchise, we're talking about billions of dollars. So again, they're making this thing from more of a global perspective, short term, long term. Short term, we can still compete. We can still have a really good chance of getting to the Western Conference Finals and getting to a championship. We still have to deal with the fact that if we pay this $350, now we don't have flexibility to build out the team because we got to sign Kyrie in the following year. Okay, and now you got to build. AD's contract falls off the books, but that's later. But if Luka was still there, he gobbles up this 350. 345, you sign Kyrie, you're not going to have a lot of room left to be able to really re-sign and build it because Lively is going to come up. You got to build out this team. So what I think owners are, and now for the Lakers, they get a discount because they can't sign Luka to the Supermax because they don't have his bird rights.
They didn't draft him.
They don't draft him. So they got cap flexibility after LeBron falls off to really build for the future. So you got a short-term play by Dallas, longer-term play by LA. Now, the business that I think is what's going to happen with these owners, I don't care how I work with the Clippers, the richest owner in sports.
Yes.
One of the best owners in sports. He doesn't want to go into the second apron. He doesn't want to go on the second apron. So the days of 2 to 3 mega superstars that are first team all NBA, like you said, I think we've turned the corner and teams are going to figure out, okay, I got my superstar. How do I build out my team and my roster to stay under this apron to still be competitive? And if I have to move off of somebody, I'll move off of somebody in order to keep my competitive advantage. Am I far off on that?
No, you're not. It's not forcing ownership to make decisions, Jimmy.
Right.
It's forcing players to make decisions when players are in free agency. Because once, let's just say a player, I'm not saying it it's an example, but it's just because his name has been in my text messages because I've been trying to figure out if he's getting traded. Let's say Brandon Ingram has signed a max deal, and you as a comparable player are saying, I'm better than him. It's not how much he makes. It's the fact that he's a max player. You're going to max me out because you maxed him out. Now it's going to be a little more negotiation, a little bit more. Once you put that max label out there, Jimmy, and I understood it was implemented after the 99 lockout, the 98 lockout.
98,
and you want to keep, that was after the Shaq big deal. That was after Michael Jordan's 2 one-year deals. That's after the Kevin Garnett deal. You wanted to suppress salaries, but what wound up happening was that became a target. So it was no longer about negotiation. It was, here's the precedent. That's the number I'm getting because it is a max deal and I am a quote unquote max player. Now, because the money has gotten so exorbitant, you can't just say max player anymore. And the team is just going to say, okay, fine, we're going to max you out because he was maxed out somewhere else. Now players are going to have to make decisions in saying, okay, I'm playing with Luka Doncic, or I'm playing with Victor Wembanyama, or I'm playing with one of these 1A top tier, will forever get paid as long as he is the guy. I have to decide, do I want to be a max player and get paid that somewhere else, or do I take 25% less? I'm just a number, maybe 10%, maybe 15%.
Right.
Will I take less? Will they offer me less? because they don't have room to play with. Like we look at, like I said before, the TV deals that have come in, NBC, Amazon, like the usual partners, and we're saying the cap is going to rise. You're absolutely right. The cap is going to rise. The problem is with the aprons and the lack of exceptions in room and flexibility, there's fewer mechanisms for you to actually get the money. You're just looking at it and saying, oh, it's money out there, go get it. But how? Unless you're a top 3 player, a top 4 player, even in Luka Doncic's case, a top 5 player, it did not guarantee that you are going to get this money. And sometimes, Jimmy, there's nothing you can do about it. This may very well be the backlash of quote unquote player empowerment. I don't know if it should be, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah, it's one of those things too, Vince, where I think owners are looking at it from the perspective of the money is getting out of control. How do I control the finances of the team? Now, players are going to have to look at it too, because again, this all has to be negotiated. Look, one of the things that owners really want to push is for non-guaranteed contracts. Okay. They've been trying to do that for years. When I was in the union, I was a VP back in the day, they wanted to get rid of it. But what they've done, if you pay attention and you've been around this, is okay, we can't get rid of non-guaranteed money. But what we did, we cut down the years. Before you can sign a 10-year deal, like when C-Webb signed his 10-year deal, Glenn
Big
Robinson,
dog.
right?
Yep.
They cut it down to what? 6. Okay. But then they cut it down to 5 for your home team, and then if you move as a free agent, it's 4. But then they've done this too. A lot of teams got away with this with more of your marginal players, a 1-and-1 with the team option. Bruce Brown, when he went to Indiana, on paper it was a $45 million contract, but only 1 year was guaranteed. The other one was a team option on the back end, I believe. Jock Londale went from Phoenix to Houston, signed a 4-year, $32 million deal, but only the first year was guaranteed. So their window to pay now has been shortened. On the books, it may say 32, but it's not, because it's not guaranteed. It's
you got to go year to year. It's a year to year, and when people see numbers on Twitter or whatever, you're making 32 million. It's almost becoming more NFL like.
And the agents push that. The agents say, look what I got my client.
Yep.
But that's not really the narrative on a lot of it.
No, because in the NFL, there's the signing bonuses. And because of the nature of how devastating the injuries are and the number of players, the system is a little bit different. In the NBA, the specialization of this, it's only 300 players in the league or whatever it is. Like, this is the greatest 300 players in the world. Everybody's trying to get to the show. So which means if you're here, you are trying to do theoretically everything you can to stay here, to lock in your place, to lock in your money, to lock in even opportunity of the franchise you're with. You even going back, Jim, to the draft has changed, where you used to be able to sign a guy, and it happened with the case of Big Dog and with Chris Webber. That's why Chris wound up leaving Golden State after his rookie year and going to Washington, because there was an out after that. They started having basically these capped contracts where if you're drafted number 1, you're getting this. You're drafted number 5, you're getting this. There's no negotiation in it. And it's saying after your 3rd year, the team is going to make a decision. After your 4th year, you're going to, go into restricted free agency if you don't have some level of, if you haven't reached an extension beforehand. And all that leads to is the itchiness of players trying to get out after that second deal, because you're locked into your rookie deal. You're by and large locked into the next deal because nobody leaves after your extension. So what has created has been, Jim, this system where players feel like, oh, after 7 years, I can sign for 25 to 30% of the salary cap, and I should be able to go where I want to go. The teams are looking at this saying, we are trying to build around you while we have you, and it's better for us to keep your wages suppressed while you're young, because you're still going to play and you're not going to be sort of incentivized to sit, as in some cases, you know what I mean? And we can do other things with veteran players to sign them to money on existing deals while we have you at a reasonable number. Like, it's almost like the system is cratering a little bit. And the players, unfortunately for the players, they had a lot of disgruntledness and to their CBA because they hired someone who was not adept. at dealing with real negotiations. She seemed like she was adept at getting in front of that damn camera. You know what I mean?
Right.
And she
But
was not.
the nuts and bolts of it. Because right now, OKC is going to have to deal with that.
Yeah, and they've handled everything well, and they're going to have to sell off players and draft picks that they've gotten because you can't draft everybody,
and you can't pay everybody that's currently that's coming up. So I'm gonna bring it back to a little bit because I want to talk about the other trades too. But the effects now that we're moving forward, we talked about. We know it's more of a business deal. We won't know what that is. I always say follow the money. The initial reaction is everybody's coming on and blah. I tend to be one, especially in business, in this game that I've been in 20 plus years. I'm not surprised by a lot of things. I was surprised by that, but once I dug into it and thought about all the information I got, maybe from AD's perspective of not wanting to play center, maybe not seeing eye to eye with JJ, I can understand stuff. And the Luka thing on that side with J Kid Nico, I can understand that. Two things. Luka, LA has to resign. It's not a guarantee. The Lakers are going to have to sell him on that, how they're going to build out the roster. The flip side of this is what I hate. A lot of vitriol is geared towards AD and Dallas and their fans. And I hope that's not the case because it's not AD. Don't take it out on AD because you're upset at the Mavericks.
Yep.
Okay. And that's what concerns me a little bit is the reaction, which they should have. I formed myself as a young man in Dallas.
And you played there. Yeah.
And I
know that market.
The passion for, especially with Luka, they connected with him. He got him to the finals, all of that. But don't take that frustration out on AD when he gets there and plays. Because I can already see it. If AD gets hurt or has a bad game, the press, the fans, all of them, and it's not him. It's not him. So the business side of it, I say this, and maybe you can chime in on the back end of this. There's a play here. We saw Caleb Martin get down there, okay? They made sure they trying to got another big forward 3-and-D guy that can play. They're competing for a championship now. To me, the bigger plays are still being shifted in this. Long-term for LA, short-term for Dallas.
Here's the crazy thing, because you are a broadcaster for the Clippers. The Clippers are the perfect example of we've played for now, we can play for later, but later doesn't have to mean 5 years down the line, right? Later in the NBA, we've traditionally thought of rebuilds and being a contending team as 5-year windows, right? Now, because of all the player movement, Jim, it's like 2 to 3. It takes 2 to 3 years to rebuild. Look at Oklahoma City. Once they lost Russ and Paul George, they had 2 or 3 two bad years, and then boom, it's like, wait, they in the play-in. Wait, they cooking here. That's the way that the system is made now. For the great teams, you're not going to be able to hold on to your players as long, so you better max out when you got that window. And if you're bad, you have enough mechanisms to get better quickly. So when I look at Dallas, I understand why Nico said, don't give me these draft picks. That's going to help another coach, another set of players, another GM, because I won't be gone by that point because I won't be able to field a contending team in the meantime.
Hey, right.
I got a 32-year-old Kyrie Irving, 34-year-old Klay Thompson, the Gaffers, the PJ Washingtons. Those guys are ready to cook now. You got Derek Lively, who is mature beyond his years, a 20-year-old, but still mature and ready to play. Like, that team went to the NBA Finals last year. You're trying to get back. Just because you traded Luka doesn't mean you're done competing.
Yeah, right.
So when you go get an Anthony Davis who has played his best basketball the last 2 seasons, where he's played 92% of games,
and people don't know
at his position,
right.
we're people of first impressions. Once we make a decision about you, it does not matter what you've done later. You know what I mean? But the receipts on Anthony Davis has shown one of the best two-way bigs in basketball, one of the most versatile bigs in basketball. He just happened to be put in a body bag by Nikola Jokic. My bad, y'all. Newsflash. Everybody gets put in a body bag by Nikola Jokic. If that's your biggest sin, then we all in trouble here. So when I look at the Lakers on the other side, I tell you this part too, Jimmy. This is the thing that I found curious. For the first time in LeBron James's career, he's a master at leverage, a master at seeing the play before it comes. He didn't see this play coming. So now, for the first time in his career, a franchise has to consider someone else's wishes and needs before they consider his. You said it. The Lakers' job with Luka Doncic is just beginning. They have to convince him and court him
Mm-hmm.
and hope that he signs a long-term extension
Yep.
in these next 2 years, which may very well be the last 2 years of LeBron James's career. And if LeBron is not cool with that, they can't placate him. He's 40 years old. Luka Doncic is 25. You don't trade Anthony Davis for another headliner if you don't plan on making the headliner your team for the next decade.
Great points, bro. And that's why I said you have to be able to see through all of the noise to understand the business side of this. The swap doesn't make sense player-wise because you got a young, transitional, once-in-a-generation player for an older player that's still balling, but you only got so much left in the tank. So that, I agree, doesn't make, unless it was so bad in Dallas that you had to do it. But that I don't think it was that bad. But the business side of it is where I say just pay attention to not just but everything that's going on around with the Mavericks ownership, okay, and where it's going. And then now it'll make sense later on. Is these moves like this and just being around it not supposed to make a lot of sense today because it's a plan in place for down the line. And then it comes together. The long game for, I think, for the Mavericks and the long game for the Lakers always been a franchise, especially when Dr. Buss took over, that name on the back of the jersey. Always got to have a superstar. Even if they're aging out like a Karl Malone, a Gary Payton, a Mitch Richmond, it didn't matter.
You got stars.
The Dwight Howard. You got to have a star. So who better now, a European star that you haven't had with the Lakers that now attracts a whole different market, okay?
That's a great
in
point.
LA.
That's a great point.
It's a whole different market. You're listen, Luka's going to be on all the stuff internationally, all the Christmas game. I don't care what's going on. Christmas Day games, all the primetime events. They're already watching him now with the Mavericks. Now he's with the Lakers. Intelligent. You can say what you want about Rob Pelinka, but right here for the few, and we don't know. Maybe they win and they don't. I don't know. We cannot predict what's going to, but I'll tell you one thing, having Luka from an international perspective on your team in the second biggest market here, but behind New York.
It's a global economy now.
Global economy, bro.
I'll tell you this. I was born in 84, but since 1975, the Lakers have gone a grand total of 7 seasons without a bona fide headliner on their roster. Some teams have never had a headliner on their roster in that time. And they've gone a grand total of 7 seasons. That's the years that Magic Johnson was out with HIV, the 3 years between Kobe Bryant retiring and LeBron James coming. Those were the only years that the Lakers were not must-see TV, and they were still, even then, living off the global brand that Magic had built, the Kareem had built, and then later on Shaq and Kobe. Now they're going to be going into a different level of global economy where Luka Doncic sells tickets, he sells jerseys, and you pair him with the Laker brand. You pair him with, like, when you looked above his head, Jim, yesterday at the Lakers facility, all the championship trophies were shined up, the numbers were on the wall. It almost feels like, oh yeah, this is what the Lakers do. They trade for Kareem. Shaq comes in free agency. Kobe comes in the trade. Like Wilt comes in. They don't draft guys. They take yours.
Yeah. Oh, man. Hey, real quick before we get out of here, 2 things. One, I just want your thoughts real quick on the De'Aaron Fox trade to San Antonio, what that does for the acceleration process of Wemby short-term and long-term.
Hey, they got problems. We got problems. The league has a problem.
We got problems.
It's like hearing 50 cents in the club for the first time. You're like, buckle up. We got a problem. That's what that is. Because now you have someone, Victor is a mature beyond his years guy, but now you have someone that can give him the ball in the spaces, that can run with him, that he can start a fast break with all on his own, and that speeds up everything the Spurs got going, and they didn't have to really give up young players with it.
Right.
You still kept your Keldon Johnsons and your
Devin
guys
Vassell,
like Devin
Jeremy
Vassell.
Shohan, yeah.
You kept all your guys that can be viewed as trade chips when you are really ready to run.
Really ready to compete.
So
what do you think? So that I think shifts, and it may be where we see them being more competitive, depending on also it's the Pop factor too. What's going to happen this year, with Pop and what he chooses to do? Because as a godfather behind Pat Riley, he can do whatever he wants. But that's going to be an interesting dynamic too. I think they'll be very competitive this year because of De'Aaron. But like you said, Victor, another year of maturing. Vassell, Shohan, those guys maturing more. Next year, they're going to be a beast. The last piece, does the Kuzma to Milwaukee for Middleton move the needle enough for Milwaukee to really be a threat like we thought they would be if Khris Middleton was healthy to Boston? Or to Cleveland, too.
It doesn't move the needle, but what it does is it eliminates the floor bottoming out if Khris Middleton gets hurt. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where the ceiling isn't as high, where you're going to get, if Middleton is right, you're going to get the shot making, you're going to get the smart play, you're going to get the best defense that he could play at this stage of his life and where his body is. But if he's not healthy, then you don't have a second side player that you can swing the ball to, and it just leaves you with nothing. Go look at those wings that they got. God bless them, but they're not guys who can go and create their own shot if the Giannis Dame pick and roll doesn't work. Kuzma is good enough to catch and shoot, attack the closeouts, a guy like that. If Giannis and Dame ain't right, Jimmy, it don't matter what happened. They losing to Boston, they losing to Cleveland, they losing to New York. They'll lose to anybody if those two guys aren't right. But if they are right, you got a fighting chance, and now you got a bigger wing that I think that can enable Giannis to play small ball center in some cases too. So it gave you a little more versatility, even if it's not a veteran guy in the traditional sense that we think of.
Listen, man, we got the back half of the season. We're already past the halfway point, but All-Star break, and then let's, at the end of the season, when we start to really get into that defined playoff mix, play-in game, circle back,
of course,
and kind of see where we're at, based off this conversation and what's happening in the league.
I'm looking forward to it, man. Appreciate you, man.
All right, bro. Appreciate you. All the way from the D, even though you're in L.A. right now.
I'm loving this sunshine, baby.
All right. My man, I appreciate you, brother.
I appreciate y'all, man.
Again, great conversation today. Just want to remind you, today is Wednesday, February the 5th. We're recording this early because of Super Bowl and everything going on. But did want to remind you that tomorrow, February 6th at 3 p.m. is the trade deadline. And before I get out of here, got to give you my Super Bowl prediction, of course, which is going to be tough. It's hard for me to bet against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And I love the story of Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and what they've done this year. And Saquon bidding for that MVP and the kind of redemption for him in New York, but also redemption for Jalen Hurts. But it's something about kind of like Bill Belichick being able to dial into a team's best asset, and he kind of takes that away. I kind of see that. So I'm thinking 27-24, Kansas City. It comes down to it, and Kansas City may have the ball at the end, and they take it home for 3 in a row. I wouldn't be mad if Philly gets it. I'm a Steeler fan, but I think it's Kansas City, but I could be wrong. I've been wrong plenty of times. But it's going to be a great one. I'm going to be out having cigars, smoking some cigars, and having some great times with friends, and I wish you the same. So thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next week.